Do you struggle to express exactly what you want to say? Perhaps you use simpler words in English, which do the job just fine, but you just don't feel like you're hitting the nail on the head, and you lack confidence with that area of your vocabulary. Today, I'm going to focus on a particular set of advanced business adjectives. And if you can use these really well, it's going to help you get across your point more clearly, and I think more in line with what you have in your head when you're using your native language. The advantage is that these adjectives aren't necessarily very hard to implement. It's not like learning a whole grammar structure, for example. And if you invest the time to learn this set of phrases, I really think it's going to be worthwhile, because as a senior manager, these are words that are going to come up time and time again. Let's crack on then, shall we? Right then, I've actually been working on this list for you for a few weeks now. I've just been adding to it as I've been going along. Most of the adjectives on this list are compound adjectives, which I'm sure you've probably heard of before, and they are wonderful tools to help you express yourself more clearly and accurately, and they're just really fun as well, I think. They certainly pop up all over the place in other languages, French, Spanish, and as far as I know, Japanese, correct me if I'm wrong. But we do use a lot of these in business specifically, so I think they're really, as I said, worthwhile learning. There are different combinations of compound adjectives, which I'm not going to go into the details now, not for this episode, but I highly encourage you, if you want to do a deep dive into the grammar, go ahead and do that, dig into it a little bit further. Just as a headline, you have one that I'm sure you're very familiar with, like short term. It's an adjective and a noun. Or maybe it could be an adjective and a present participle, like English speaking colleague. Or it can even be a number and a noun, a 2-hour meeting. I'm sure you've had one of those recently. Also, as an extra bonus this week, I'm actually going to put in the newsletter an Anki Flashcard deck with some of the phrases from this podcast so that you can review the vocabulary. Anki is one of the applications I recommend to everyone. If you haven't heard me recommend it before, this is essentially a small file that you can import into your own Anki, and you're going to be able to practice the words from this podcast. If you want to make sure that you get that, sign up and become a free member of the podcast. Go to the show notes of this episode. Don't worry if you are listening to this after the fact, because you can sign up and you're still going to get access to all the other materials that I've shared previously. Let's start with the list then, and with all the learning that we do on this podcast, I'm going to start by giving you some context and give you a frame to learn this word. All right, the first one. How would you describe your job if I asked you right now? Hard, difficult, demanding perhaps, tough, intense. All completely fine, by the way. Absolutely no problem with them. But what about fast-paced? Fast-paced is a beautiful little compound adjective with a past participle combination. And as you can kind of guess from the word, it's used to describe this type of job where everything is moving very quickly. You can also say that you work in a very fast-paced industry, technology, for example, supplier management, buying. I mean, there's so many industries that are very fast-paced, and I imagine this could be a really good way to describe your job and what you do, and just gives you another alternative rather than saying demanding, difficult, hard, etc. I think another thing is that the other ones, hard, difficult, demanding, tough, they all kind of carry this negative connotation, whereas fast-paced is really more in the world of positivity. It's a great one that you could throw in on your CV, or if you're at an interview and you want to describe what your job is like. Some people thrive in fast-paced jobs. They absolutely love it. They would be completely bored if they were in a job that wasn't fast-paced. Fast-paced isn't necessarily the same as being under pressure, but it's in the same family, let's say. The next one. I was speaking to one of my clients this week and it was really interesting. I know I've said this before, but one of the things I just love is I get to find out about all these different industries that I would just never have any contact with. And okay, of course, I'm not an expert, but you kind of get to know the key trends and themes in different industries and sectors, which is really, really fun. Anyway, I digress. I was speaking to my client and they are a senior manager in sales. In fact, I've worked with a few people in sales. Maybe you also work in that area. They were talking about the impact of generative AI on their industry. And essentially they were saying that AI is really going to have a big impact on the administrative side of things, and that actually a lot of time is taken up in sales with admin tasks, calling people, putting things in the CRM system, etc. Now, maybe that sounds very familiar. I'm sure there's some side of your job that is taken up with a lot of admin. How could you describe that? Well, you could say that it takes a lot of time, that you spend a lot of time doing these tasks. Or maybe even bonus point, you could say it takes up a lot of time. A nice alternative is the compound adjective time-consuming. Some things at work are just really time-consuming. It doesn't matter what way you look at it. You have to do them, they have to be done, and they're really time-consuming. Something can be really time-consuming, but ultimately it can be worth the effort. And of course, then there are some things that are unnecessarily time-consuming and can be made to be much more efficient and streamlined. What tasks in your day would you say are really time-consuming? Next one. I'm thinking about a specific client that used to travel a lot, and they used to go back and forth to London specifically. And they would, maybe you were like this as well, they would fly very, very early in the morning, but then they would come back at night because they're like, I prefer to come back and be in Madrid rather than stay overnight. And you know, one of these days where you wake up at like, let's say 4 a.m. or maybe even 3 a.m. to get to the airport because you've got to get the 5 a.m. flight, maybe to go to Barcelona or somewhere else, regional. Then you spend the whole day there going to meetings, the lunches, whatever, and then you get the flight back. You could describe that as being tiring, exhausting, and of course, bonus British points if you say something like shattered or knackered. Those are very typical ways that we describe that in British English. Well, I'm going to propose another way that you could say this, which is your day was very full on. This is technically an idiomatic expression rather than a compound adjective, and we use it to describe those days, you know what I mean, where you go to an event, it's like 14 hours, it's really intense, it's tiring, and really full on. Imagine I'm your colleague and I ask you, how was the event? And you're like, oh, it was great, but really full on. Just means it was intense, it was tiring, it was packed. And we use it really specifically for this type of event or conference or day that is really busy, rather than necessarily saying, my week was really full on when you're talking about your day-to-day job. Does that make sense? Next up, do you have to work with the public sector at all? I work with a client who works very closely with the public sector, and it's always really funny because whenever we talk about it, I mean, they're incredible at what they do, but they find this part very, very frustrating because it takes a long time. There's a lot of red tape. Red tape just means bureaucracy. Like literally, like if you've got red tape that's stopping you moving forward. And essentially things move at a glacial pace. Ooh, I love that. That wasn't on my list, but let's add that in. Glacial pace. Like a glacier that moves like 20 centimeters every day. So how could you describe that? Well, you could say frustrating, you could say slow, you could say irritating, but let's give it an upgrade. Let's go from economy to business. And I'm going to give you this compound adjective, which is compound adjective, which is slow moving. The public sector in general is a very slow moving industry. And it's very frustrating to work on these type of projects because they're very slow moving. I don't think that warrants any further explanations. I think you get the gist of that one, but it's a nice little upgrade to just using slow. The next two, we're just going to bash them out really quickly, and these are a couple of my favorite ones. This is for you if you work on any type of task or project. What would you call a task that is uncomplicated, without any hidden complexities? Easy, perhaps? Simple? Well, yes, you could call it that, but why not next time try out straightforward? Honestly, it's pretty straightforward. I don't think we're going to need that much time. It's a very straightforward piece of work. I don't think that there'll be any issues whatsoever. Or maybe on the other hand, I could advise you and say, well, actually it's not as straightforward as you think. There are a lot of moving parts. Straightforward is a beautiful advanced upgrade to easy or simple. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, well, Anna, what's the difference between easy and straightforward? That is a valid question. Think about it like this at a high level. Let's distinguish easy as focusing on the lack of challenge. And let's say straightforward is really emphasizing simplicity. Last but not least, I was working with a client this morning actually, and we were preparing a presentation. And in part of that, they had to bring up an issue that's a little bit awkward to their executive team. Some people were traveling to Spain for this meeting actually. We were talking about how to diplomatically get across in English this issue that they were having. And they were describing this approach and methodology that they really felt wasn't working very well at all, to be honest. How could you describe that? Well, you could say ineffective, not working very well, bad maybe, but that's normally something that we tend to avoid. Well, what about counterproductive? I love this one, and I don't think people use this a lot. Do you use this? Counterproductive? Essentially what was happening with this client is they were having to spend so much time doing one specific task, and it was completely counterproductive because it was taking people away from the goal that they should be focusing on. And that's what counterproductive means. It's when you are essentially moving energy away from being productive and following goals. It's not a compound adjective. Apparently it's a prefix adjective, but whatever, it's an adjective. Excessive meetings are counterproductive. Micromanagement is often completely counterproductive. What can you think of in your role, team, department, maybe now or in the past, that you felt was really counterproductive? Let's wrap it up there then. In summary, 6 advanced business adjectives that I would really recommend that you can start using straight away. How are we going to make this practical? As you know, I'm always keen to help you actually put this into practice. In the newsletter, I'm going to send you a little Anki card deck. And these are flashcards that you can use to practice this vocabulary. Don't worry if you haven't got the app yet. I'm going to send the instructions in the email. And you can use it completely for free. There's no need to pay anything if you don't want to. That is going to be your practical exercise for this week. And other ways that you could do it are translate it into your own language. That's going to give your brain a reference. You can also write out some sentences of your own, but sentences that you can actually imagine yourself saying. The closer to reality, the better. If you want that Anki card deck, don't forget to sign up and become a free member of the podcast. You're joining over 8,000 other professionals. The link is in the show notes of this episode. Thanks so much, as always, for squeezing me into your very busy day, and I will be back again next week for another episode. Bye-bye.